Hello again! If you were watching last time, then you should have seen a simple verb tenses review where we talked about the simple past, present, and future. If you didn't see that lesson, you should just go watch that lesson before you watch this one, because in that lesson I broke down what a verb is, what it does, why it's important, and you really should know that before we just jump into this one, because I'm not going over it again. It just takes too much time and I just don't want to keep repeating myself. So, we're just starting with our progressive verb tenses review. Welcome. First thing you need to know, the progressive verb tenses can also be called the continuous verb tenses. Those essentially mean the same thing. You might hear the past progressive or the past continuous. Sometimes it might be easier to think about it as the continuous verb tenses because that tells you what these verb tenses do or why we use them. The continuous or progressive verb tenses tell us about an action that starts and continues in a specific time. So we're going to be talking about the past progressive, present progressive, and future progressive verb tenses. What you also need to know is that all of these verb tenses use what we are calling the present participle, which is the verb plus ing. Now, when we talk about this verb here, we're talking again about the bare infinitive. And what that means is that that's just the word that you would look up in the dictionary. Okay? So however you would look up a word, as long as it's a verb, use that word and add ing, and you have the present participle of the verb. If the verb ends in e, you might have to take away the e and add ing, but you should already know that. So, the other important thing that you need to remember, and it's written all over this board, is that these verb tenses can only be verb tenses when they include the be verb. So, the way you make all of these continuous or progressive verb tenses is by adding the appropriate be verb to the verb ing. Let's look at some examples as we go through. First, the past progressive or past continuous verb tense. This tense is generally used to talk about actions getting interrupted in the past. So, the action starts in the past, continues for a little bit, and ends in the past, and usually we're telling you how it ended. For example, I was eating a sandwich, and all of a sudden everything fell out of the sandwich into my lap. So while I was eating the sandwich, everything fell out. Has that ever happened to you? I just hate when that happens. It just makes a mess. Anyway, as you can see, the action started in the past, and then it was ended in the past. And that is the past progressive or past continuous verb tense. The present progressive is probably the most often confused verb tense because we talk about it like it's the present simple. But it's not. These are very different verb tenses. When you are talking about something you are doing right now and you're still doing it, it's an ongoing action, then you are using the present progressive verb tense. For example, you are, I hope, watching and listening to me. And I am talking to you. I mean, I'm talking to a camera and I'm still doing it, but I like to think of someone actually behind the camera watching me. That's just a personal thing. But this is an ongoing action. It's going to be ongoing until this video ends. But I'm not going to keep talking about it, because that will just get boring. Let's move on. Sorry, before we move on, remember the present tenses of the be verb. Is, am, are, plus verb ing. Now we can move on. Lastly, we're talking about the future continuous or future progressive. If you remember from the simple verb tenses last lesson, then you remember that the simple future is probably the simplest verb tense. We are simply using the bare infinitive in these patterns of words. Will, verb, or to, and remember the be has to change, plus the verb. Here, we're doing the exact same thing, except instead of the bare infinitive, we're using the be verb ing. We're using the present participle construction, or the present participle pattern. So, I might say, I will be sleeping by midnight, if I'm lucky. Man, I just did not get a lot of sleep last time. But anyway, I am going to be going to work when the weekend is over. I'm actually filming this on a weekend. I bet you didn't know that. So, let's review.
Progressive verb tenses review. What are progressive verb tenses, also known as? They are also known as continuous verb tenses. What does the progressive continuous verb tense do? It tells you about an action that starts and continues in a specific set of time. What do the past, present, and future progressive verb tenses use? They all use the present participle, verb plus ing. What do the progressive continuous verb tenses need to include? They need to include the appropriate form of be plus verb plus ing. What is the past progressive continuous verb tense used for? It is generally used to talk about actions getting interrupted in the past. What is the present progressive continuous verb tense used for? It is used to talk about something that the subject is doing now, and it is still an ongoing action. What is the form used for the future progressive or continuous verb tense? Will be plus verb ing, be going to plus verb ing.